Good morning, everybody. It's quite a misty morning here. Um, I looked out this morning and couldn't decide if the windows were all misted up on the inside or if that was actually mist on the outside. But it isn't the same way you are, is it, Hermione?
Well, it looks very light, and it is very light, but it is raining. So kind of grey sky. I'm in a new position today. Maybe if I tilt there's a skylight above me there, and I have a lovely view out to the church. But it's very grey currently
It
and
looks like
raining.
those beautiful skylights that Mike and Leslie have got in their kitchen,
Well,
haven't
that's
they? That we
what I was just
looked
thinking. I need to get a helix up in here.
You do.
Mm,
So we had a wonderful session on Friday. Really lovely to see everyone. And we were trying a new experiment, weren't we? Trying an experiment where we could collect all the photographs together and that you could browse them the way you wanted. And then in the session, to remind you of what's there, we could browse them together. So we're trying today, you've got that coming up. It's got our Out of the Ordinary Autumn collection, different views. And here, hopefully, is gradually coming down in a way that doesn't make you seasick, the views of the pictures we started with. So we had a little look at all sorts of things that caught our eye, didn't we?
mm,
Um, and it being Remembrance Day that day, we started our session in an unusual way. So we started with a really beautiful reflection that Esther played on the harp, and we shared this photograph here, this field of poppies.
mm,
Really, I mean, it's the
mm.
most incredibly sharp focus, isn't it? Those
Yeah.
those two foreground pale ones, you feel
Mm,
as if you could
mm.
almost see through them.
Yeah.
So I suppose it kind of got us thinking in a reflective, thoughtful mood, didn't it? And then Katie played us a soliloquy, which really did kind of crystallize, especially for you, Leslie, the feeling of what's going on in your
Mm.
internal dialogue and how that changes all the time, all those shifting moods that there could be. And you spoke so beautifully about the way that that could be going on in your mind all through the day. And we conjured up for you a moment of calm. You spoke about a point at which in the afternoon sometimes you just both rest and sit together on the sofa, and that ends up being a moment of peacefulness and calm. So we tried to amplify that a little bit into a sort of moment that you can maybe listen to again. So we'll be sending you the links to that. And we thought about how those moments of internal language can be kind of seen on your face and in your hands. I can't remember exactly the way we threaded our direction through, but we talked about hands and how expressive they were.
Mm.
Perhaps it was linked to these. I'm scrolling to look for those rolled
Yes, I was going to say
lengths
it's
of
funny
knitted
you should
scarves.
use the word threaded their way through, because I think it really was the thread that prompted yeah, here they
Here,
are. Yeah.
here they are. These ones that Geraldine had noticed. This one especially. Now I couldn't get this one to come up very big. It's rather a little picture,
Hmm.
so I hope you can see that one all right. But maybe even in the distance, it gives you
Mm.
an even better impression because it reminded you, Geraldine, about of the cross sections of cut tree logs and
Yeah.
how every different season and every different mood, the different weather that there's been in each year and every season shows
Hmm.
in those tree rings, which are most beautifully shown here in these rolled up lengths of knitted wool, which sort of have the influence of every different person who's contributed something to them, don't they? And
Mm.
then there was one that was a bigger photograph of them near,
Mm.
which I particularly love. Um,
Mm.
and we spoke about how that might work for humans, and we settled on our hands as being the thing that maybe tells the story of ourselves. We can maybe see in our actual hands the lengths of the fingers, the organization of the lines, how pronounced they are, the relative lengths of fingers compared to each other, and the different shapes of the joints. And that Geraldine talked about how she's trained in reading these clues, these secret stories hidden in our hands. So we tried an experiment of working with our hands. We used our hands a lot in the session on Friday, creating that quiet moment of calm for Leslie and Mike, because their hands are so expressive, and Mike's hands say such a lot where he can't say those things in words. And we used our hands again in a piece for Geraldine and Chris, where we all, I think as you said, Geraldine, it made me really laugh when you said that we should all play together. We would just experiment with the screen and see what we could do by responding to each other's gestures and to each other's hands. So there's all kinds of official languages, isn't there, for communicating with hands, like Makaton and sign language, different versions of sign language. We talked about the mudras that are so expressive, hand gestures in yoga, and the different kind of language in dance. Gregory talked about a book about a dance company, Dancing Out of Bali. Is that the name of the book? Greg, you were going to have a look at it and remind yourself of it again, but it was talking about the different expressive language of dancers in Bali and communicating that across different spoken languages. So yes, we used our hands a lot, and I think we found that a really beautiful way to work. We're always sort of just sort of testing at the edges of what we can do and finding a musical way of using our own bodies that doesn't necessarily even need sound and can be picked up by the instruments. So yes, we tried with our hands. We wanted to see if we could find a way. We haven't actually managed to solve the entire tech question yet, but we're wondering whether we can try and send you the audio files on their own so you can listen to them like you might listen to the radio. But we're working on that. We're sort of one little success with this photo share, and we think we can do anything. So here they were. We looked at all manner of these photographs. We had a little look at this one where there's this sort of wonderful upside downy views and the mirrors in the bottom that allow you to see something else. And I was reminded of the way you can wheel a sort of waitress trolley in a cathedral and look at the bosses and the ceiling in there, which I always find incredibly disorientating, because you're sort of the way you want to try to move your head to see certain things and it all works the opposite way. So we looked at this one and I think this is Blenheim Palace, isn't it, where Leslie had taken this little very playful little video of the rocking seats that are not toys. I think that's perfectly true, but that give you an opportunity. Can you see that still? That give you an opportunity to look at the ceiling. Is it just loading? Let's give it a moment. Oh no.
They sort of remind me of bobbins.
They do. They do. They just look so brilliant. Shall I try it again?
Yeah. Oh, that's funny, isn't
Not
it?
doing it
because it's working fine in the well, that just shows you one little success, and we think we've mastered everything.
We can do anything.
It's just reminding us that is not the case.
Yes, and I'm thinking about Christine and Graham and hoping that we can solve the difficulties that they had in getting their new laptop to pick up their voices. It seems to me it's, in certain frames of mind enormously frustrating, and in other frames of mind quite a fascinating thing that just out of your reach is something happening in there that can clearly easily be solved, because that's the way that computers work, isn't it? It's either this or it's this. But if you don't know the question to be asking, you can't see at all how it's thinking. It's like that Harry Potter, isn't it? Don't trust anything if you can't see where it keeps its brain. So we had a look. Were there any others? Ah, yes. John and Louise talked about this photograph taken in Berlin, where your daughter has lived for quite a long time. This did really make us chuckle, because Louise was keen to snap this man post-party with some of the evidence of his party there on the floor, and he clearly couldn't get any further. I like the thought that John ran away and left Louise to take the photograph in case the man woke up. But it seemed like he wasn't likely to wake up for a while. Which were the other? Ah, yes, and this one caught your eye, Greg, of these hay bales
On the
poised on
wonk.
the side of a stratospheric slope, all just about to tumble. That's right. And when we brought this photograph up, everybody's heads went in the same kind of direction to look at it. This is one of Hermione's specials, on the wonk, the hay bale sitting down. Being able to see the photographs in this way gave us a chance just to sort of remind ourselves of what things were in there and what things were really striking. So when we were asking Louise and John if we could make a piece for them, they chose this fantastic picture, very very on time, isn't it? I can't remember the right expression for that, but really of the moment, because this picture of the shadows on the steps and one single poppy cupped there in John's hand in the shadow, sort of absolutely wonderful photograph. And we created an improvisation for you based on this one that you chose, and it had some lovely step-like figures in the beginning that, again, some people noticed those with their hands and organised them in the windows. So I hope that those sorts of things give you ideas of how we can work as well, what things we might do and how playful we can be. It really is quite a chance to communicate with each other in all manner of ways we can think of. So we created a piece, The Poppy on the Stairs, I called it, I think, in my notes anyway. That's which is obviously all there is. I put that in there, The Poppy on the Slope. And there was also, on the theme of Remembrance Day, this fantastic bench that that John had taken a while ago in John Samuel had taken in Kew Gardens, which we loved the idea of the thought that it wasn't until you were thinking about the session that morning that you conjured up this picture into your mind. And I think that is absolutely what we hope will happen, is that things that have been existing quietly in the background suddenly sort of present themselves to your attention. Now, Samuel, you said there were 2 photographs of this and that one picture showed the other side of the bench. And the inscription here, we couldn't get the photograph in this form to conjure it up more in it, to zoom in, but we can do that and call it. It's that beautiful inscription about lest we forget their memories will not fade with the sun like us who are left, and that they'll stay exactly as they were. I heard a very beautiful song on the radio that was about that, actually, and I tried to save it, but because it was on a radio program, it's kind of disappeared. The link doesn't work. It was this absolutely gorgeous song about those who will never get old. It was a lovely, lovely folk song about these boys coming from all around the country to the fair in their absolute prime, and that being just poised before they went off to war, and thinking of them as this amazing golden highlight of their life, that they would never be anything other than perfectly youthful and formed in their absolute zenith of their being.
Zenith,
and I think
that's a good word.
Zenith. So Samuel, we don't seem to be able to find the picture of the other side of the bench, so I wondered if you could send it again. I've added this into the album now, so you can remind yourself that it's there, and maybe that will prompt you to send it. So we've added another one here.
Yes. By popular request. This is my oak tree, a photo that my dad took and sent me recently as evidence of the abundance of acorns that you can see. So yeah, it's I mean, what do you think, Caroline? Is it what you expected?
It's absolutely incredible. It's so much bigger than I thought it was going to be. It's amazing to think that you actually just planted an acorn and it grew.
Yeah. I'm trying to think how many. So it's over 20 years old, but I can't remember exactly how old I was when I planted the acorn as an experiment. But I kind of only looked up more recently kind of what the chances are of it actually growing into a tree, and then also the fact that it would produce its own acorns. Yeah, so I think a happy coincidence maybe, or just things aligning, the soil being exactly the way it needed to be, or the depth of the hole that I dug, or how much water. I'm not sure exactly what all the variables were, but I guess linking back to what Geraldine was saying about the inside of the tree, I wonder, well, one of the things that this tree does tell is there's a rope mark. I don't know if you can see it. We had a dog that would often be, we'd tie her to the tree so she could be outside, and there it reached a point where the tree actually sort of engulfed the
Wow.
rope. Yeah. And it's also, this tree is also used as part of the washing line, so it's kind of, it's got different things that can be seen in the outside of its bark, but I do wonder how its stories are going inside the rings of the
It's
tree.
a wonderful example of scale, isn't it? And the sort of the lifetime of trees.
Mm.
I'm going to send you this beautiful track that I was mentioning from an album by a musician called Johnny Flynn, who you might have
Mm.
seen. He's an actor as well. He's been in lots of things that people will have seen here that have proved to be very popular or highly rated. But he wrote, during lockdown, he wrote this album to the words of the poet Robert Macfarlane, all about the story of Enkidu, and it's the myth of Gilgamesh, is it? Is that the story? He'd sort of realised it in new words and sent these little poems to Johnny Flynn, who's turned them into an album of music. And I do think it's a really magical piece of work, especially considering, sort of like us, that they were individually working on something, and the results kind of overlap and enmesh together in a way that's really quite wonderful. But thinking about the scale of trees, this tree is still so youthful, isn't it? Because I read somewhere that oak trees, they sort of spend, growing to maturity takes them 300 years, and then they thrive in their zenith at 300 years, and then after that they may take 300 years to decline until the tree cycle is concluded. So it's so young, and yet it looks so big to consider it grew from an acorn you planted, didn't it?
Yes, I am very proud of it.
I know in one of our other series we had some pictures of those ginger flowers, didn't we? I think those were Margot's pictures from taken from far away, from somewhere exotic where those ginger flowers grew really incredibly, several different varieties of it. And I have had, I mean, often it happens to me that ginger that I buy sits around for a while and then starts to sprout a bit. But I've had one that has most extraordinarily started to grow, and it's growing lots of little green leaves, and it's gotten quite tall now. It's about sort of 6 inches tall. And so I've planted it, sort of. I mean, I didn't really know what to do, so I've kind of planted it a bit, I've given it a bit of compost anyway, and it seems to be growing. So I'm keeping an eye on there and hoping that maybe one of these days I might have some flowers there that would look something like those incredible
You've been
ones that.
keeping this very quiet, Caroline. How long's all this been going on?
Well, some weeks I didn't hardly dare to hope that it was going to
I
actually
dare to hope.
grow.
I can't help but, I mean, I feel like you should have a camera. You know how people have, like during Spring Watch or something, where they have a camera on it and then they
Oh
sort of
yes.
speed it up. I feel like you should have a GoPro camera or something filming it, and then you kind of get weeks worth of footage and then speed it up into, a short
Yes, I could
clip.
do some time lapse so we can
Yeah.
see hundreds of years. Maybe you should set one up on your acorn, and then in the
Yeah.
900 years we'll be able to
Well, I'm
see.
also thinking about Martina and her bountiful display of things. I mean, that would have been quite an undertaking to capture all of that on film.
Yes. Yeah, it really would. In fact, I think on one of those David Attenborough programs, they were talking
Mm,
about trying to create the conditions where they could film these
mm,
water plants
mm,
growing, and that they'd made a sort of elaborate water tank that,
mm,
that they could see from all angles, and they'd with a construction with so that the camera could travel all
mm,
over it, so you could see how quickly these little sort of underwater roots were streaking forward
mm.
to make new connections and new networks together. So there was also, speaking of shrieking and making new connections, there was this glorious photograph of fireworks on the beach in Llandudno that Michael sent. Really, Michael, those photographs that you take are so incredible. I mean, I watched fireworks out of the window here when it was November the 5th. And because unusually I've been here for sort of 13 or 14 years and I've never seen anybody do that in their gardens here. But for some reason down in the gardens very close to me, they did set off some fireworks this year. And I all I could think was there's no way that I could capture them. I kept trying to get a sort of view of it. I couldn't see anything that was worth seeing at all. But you managed to capture the actual moment of sort of bursting into life of these fireworks in an amazing way. So we've added them into the album, and I think now we're sort of, I wouldn't say master of it, but we're that's the royal me. I vaguely remember how to get the photographs into the album. So that should mean that when you open it up and browse through it, anything we've added will appear there. That's the hope anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So have a little browse through. You can come to the session on Friday. So we've not very many days in between now before we see you. So on Friday will be the next session. This was an extra one we added because I was ill. So hopefully you'll be able to get there. And if not, well, know that you are part of the loving stitches woven into the project, into the tree rings of the project anyway. And that maybe you have a look for a favourite photograph or something that you would like us to realise in a musical way for you, in sound, in the sessions on Friday or in the ones to come. So we'll leave you with a view of the photos all in their little tiles. Hopefully it will spark some exploration for you, some of your favourite things. I like these hearts. This looks like a heart to me.
Yeah, it does to me too.
It's beautiful. So Margot, maybe one of these ones, you can choose your favourite one of these that we can see if we can translate the colours into sounds. I'm just scrolling back up to the top to remind you of what we have in here. There's Mike serenely gazing out over the promise of new growth. As we come into this winter season, it's important, isn't it, to remember how everything's probably already well primed for spring growth. All those grey skies, pets entertainingly watching the television there, and the curves of this incredible sort of skyline there in the mountains. There's colours. We looked at these Antony Gormley figures in the beach. It's really, again, most wonderful photograph. Perfectly framed there with these tiny little figures looking out to sea, maybe trying to reach out to each other. Container ship there on the horizon, and then I think even beyond that there's the possibility of other buildings there as well on the next point of land. And that feeling of ebb and flow, these waves coming in. So yes, every time I look at this album, I see different things that I love in it. And each day a different thing might catch your eye. So feel free to have a little browse. This is I added one more picture because this is my favourite place to sit, and this is where I actually do sit. So this is the curve of the log that I sit in. And here is how it looks fallen there against the crest of the hill in my park. So yes, maybe you have a particular favourite view. All these curves, windows, secret windows. That one looks like a keyhole, doesn't it? Some of those. And we're back at our original soliloquy for this one little pigeon sitting on the grass at Ealing Common. Well, we're looking forward to seeing you on Friday. Come and be ready to explore if you want to, or come with a thought of how you'd like things to go. Everybody's contributing already so much. We're really delighted with how things are going. So we're looking forward to seeing you on Friday.
Yeah. Bye for now.
Bye for now.